Great. So I'll go over again, but like we were speaking about, Mr. Sanjay, I think it's a great initiative. And I think a lot of these things are anecdotal, and you may not necessarily find them in all of the massive resources out there, right? Like these anecdotal experiences. And I think a lot of them are sadly hidden behind paywalls. So again, getting this information out there is super helpful for people. At least it would have been if I were younger and I would have found it. Yeah.
I completely agree with you. So, today we are expecting to cover the following topics: your personal experience at Northeastern. Then, I don't know how much do you remember, but that is the main thing that we want you to help the audience understand how did you manage the application process, then essays and application strategy, activities and profile building, college selection and shortlisting, international student experience, and then leadership and extracurricular activities that you participated into. So let's start with our first question to you. Northeastern University is renowned for its experiential learning. Can you share how the university has helped in your learning process and what learning you brought back to India?
Sure. So I think it's really interesting because I don't remember much of my experience, but it's almost like I've just lived that experience. I have two of my younger siblings who are at Trinity College, Connecticut, and I sort of went through that process with them, right? And it's really interesting how I can really see that differentiation when it comes to Northeastern versus I'm comparing their experience at Trinity or like other smaller liberal arts colleges, right? So I think Northeastern, again, is very distinctive because of its co-ops. And I first went into Northeastern as a computer engineering major, like straight computer engineer. And I got there and I realized that, okay, like I'm not a hardware person. I just want to learn how to code. And I paired that with cognitive psychology. So that would lead to perhaps more research, now AI-centric roles. But when I went on my first co-op, which was at a blue-blooded bank in America, the oldest and biggest in the US, that's when I realized that finance could be kind of cool. And I came back from that co-op, and that's when I declared my second major in finance. So for me personally, that entire co-op experience and experiential learning is very central to my college experience and even my career, right? Like what I'm doing right now, trying to drive investments, trying to see that return come through. I think that was a very critical, pivotal point for me. And I would, again, if I would have never immersed myself in an environment like that, I probably wouldn't know that finance is something that I like or I enjoy or I could be good at, right? So enormously powerful from my vantage point.
Very interesting. So, can you talk a little bit about your favorite academic experience or class at Northeastern? How did it influence your career goals?
Sure. So I think, again, apart from co-ops, I think what I found really helpful at Northeastern was the kind of diversity that I saw around. And again, it wasn't until recently when I realized that most colleges are actually not as diverse. My brother is in a class of 25 students right now, his first year seminar, and he is the only person of color. And he is the only international student, right? So that's when I contrasted back to my experience, where I was actually sitting in classes that maybe constituted like 40% of the students in the class were international, which I think really helped in terms of my academics. I feel like diversity for me has been really central. I went to boarding school, which was really diverse. And when we can sit across the table learning about something coming from vastly different perspectives, right? Where, again, like my understanding of neural networks, right? Like something like that, if I'm able to describe to the class with really bringing my experience into the fold while describing it is sort of a new way for someone else to learn about it, right? But specifically, I would talk about Professor Kevin Gold. I took a master's class with him. It was a 50-person lecture, and it was on AI. And I'm talking about AI back in like 2018, when AI was not AI that it is today. And I think what was really good about that class, which I still keep in my mind, as we're talking about AI all the time, and like people don't really understand it or don't really have enough context, but it's become sort of this buzzword, right? But I think going back to that learning environment, like professors like him really made me realize that there are going to be n number of things coming in from different industries, whether it's finance or computer science, and really getting down to what is it, right? Like in that class, there were different models that we developed and coded, but the one key insight that I took away from it was you can any program is just a layer, right? And you can sort of like bring that back down to an if then else statement. So I think now when I'm evaluating investment opportunities for a family office or whatever it may be, I'm sort of able to really condense that down to like a really complex startup, down to, okay, like this is the core of what they're doing. So I think really the ability to get through to someone who's new to a culture, new to an environment, and get through to them that, okay, like this is what it means. I think that's a very, very hard skill to hone as a teacher. Like that is a good marker of a good teacher for me. And I really experienced that at Northeastern. So yeah.
Wonderful. So we'll move to our next question. How did Northeastern prepare you for your current career? Were there specific courses or experiences that were particularly valuable? You spoke about some of the academic experience, but maybe whatever you are pursuing now and you want to pursue in the future, in the near future, how did the university prepare you for that?
Right. I think I have my opinion on this is actually a little different from a lot of what you'll hear out there. Because I don't think that I necessarily go for my undergraduate to study finance and become a banker, right? I'm not a banker. That's not what I'm doing. I think that undergrad for me sort of helps solidify this fundamental basis of just how do I learn? How do I work? How do I engage with people around me, right? So I think that, I studied computer science and finance, and over my career has not been super long. I've been working for maybe 4-5 years. And over the span of just these 4-5 years, it feels like I've had 3 different careers, right? I was a programmer, then I moved into fundraising and working with a startup. And now I'm finally in a completely different industry, which is real estate, construction, real hardcore assets. So I think that it wasn't necessarily the coursework, which was tangible and which I'm applying in my life right now. I think it's rather, again, the experiences, right? Whether it's the clubs I engaged with, or whether it's the founder network that I'm able to tap into, right? Like the Northeastern founder network. That's where I really understand and get a pulse on, okay, there's some guy building out of Bhopal, right? He's trying to replace cement in the industry. And cement, for context, is the biggest carbon problem in the construction industry. So someone who's trying to do that out of waste, that's so cool. And how do I have access to that? Because I'm a part of this thriving community. And yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah.
Yeah, it definitely answers my question. And also what I understand from what I can hear from you is that undergrad usually prepare you in so many things that you can try out number of things, and then if you want to specialize, then you can further go and study. So yes. But it definitely gave you some skills and exposure of world class that you are applying at the moment.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So the next question is the application regarding this application process. It can be really daunting and hectic. How did you manage your academics and the application process simultaneously?
Right. I think now I'm like really throwing it way back. Like I'm trying to think back to Woodstock and like me trying to climb up a hill
Yeah.
frantically to make it to my 8 a.m. class. Yeah, that was it. That was really hectic. But I think that honestly, I would credit my boarding school, like my high school Woodstock, a lot here, because I think that what they did phenomenally well is really staggering that admissions process, right? I think what I have seen over time after my experiences, students usually just go in and they're just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna apply, and like you have 3 months from the application and you don't then you are mapping out your LORs, or like the 10 different things that are required. And I think that actually going in and staggering your process through, right, throughout the months, or however much how much of a time you have on your hand, really helped me, and I think is really helpful. I think being able to really go back, I mean, I think most people now are prepared that they want to go to college and have a good enough understanding whether they're looking at schools locally or abroad. And I think I think just the only thing that really helped me is getting ahead of the process. And I was lucky enough that it was actually just built into my school coursework, right, where I wasn't going the extra mile to do something else. But yeah, I distinctly remember, I think it was right when I became a senior, which was like 1 year before the applications due, where they really kicked that process off, right? Where like, okay, like start identifying who do you want to get a letter of recommendation from, and like which faculty member really knows you, and how have you immersed yourself in the past few years. So yeah, I think the TLDR is just start early.
Cool. So looking back, is there anything you wish you had done differently during the application process? It's a follow-up question. And any lessons learned that you would share with current applicants?
Yes, I think that we live in a world where people have growingly, like especially the younger students and like children out there, I know I felt this back in the day, but we just have this tendency to really underestimate ourselves, right? So I think my applications were capped to maybe like 5 colleges. And I remember when I was like hitting that apply button, I was really anxious because I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I hope I receive an acceptance from at least one of them. And I got into all my colleges, right? And then decided to go to Northeastern. But I think one thing that I would do differently is I would just be more ambitious. I think there is so much talk and so much fear looming around. Oh my God, like you're not good enough for this, and you haven't made the cutoffs. But I think that, especially with, again, this may be like the 6th time I've spoken about AI, which is like ironic because I don't feel the relevance as much. But especially with ChatGPT, right? Like schools know that in the future, student skill set may actually not be as quant heavy, right? So the world is changing, and the requirements which got people into certain schools before may not actually apply anymore. And honestly, I just wish I would have applied to more schools and not been scared. Okay, like worst case, I get a rejection, but I know that I tried, right? So I think the only thing that I would say is just don't be scared of shooting your shot, and yeah.
So can you share a bit about, you spoke about students should be preparing early, right? Start early. So now it's a very connected point that nowadays if they want to go to US or even earlier also during your time, they need to have a very good profile, in terms of they have demonstrated leadership, they must have demonstrated social inclination, social commitment. So what do you suggest in terms of profile building? When they should be starting to build their profile, so that when they are applying, they are ready?
Right. So I think this just goes back to what we were talking about before. I just think like it's never too early to start in some way, where I think that there needs to be some understanding. But I also I'm a believer that things need to be the end in themselves. And I think some of the coolest people I've been meeting every day are people who are actually passionate about what they're doing. And I think that it goes back to my point where I think if you're sort of leading with that way that, okay, I want to get into X college and I am doing this because this is the requirement for X college, I think that may actually hurt your chances, because how passionately I'm able to speak about, I don't know, tea doesn't necessarily translate to how I'm able to talk about I don't know, rubber bands, right? So I think that the power really stays in being authentic and just being able to really articulate that story really well, right? Hopefully you have children who have so much access to different resources now. So really being able to articulate how your story makes sense and articulate your passion, I think that is probably the key. And again, going back to, I think that just start early, just start as early as possible, right? Just start thinking about how are your dots connecting, and how are things making sense for you.
Any suggestion in terms of how do they manage their stress? I understand that, and we are seeing a lot of students coming late to us or starting the process very late. So they have their board exams coming up, they have their to begin with, if they are deciding in August, September, then they have to give their half yearly exams, they have to manage so many applications. There's if they have not given SAT or not, they have not earned good numbers in SAT, then they have to give the SAT. So there's so many things happening in their life, and then suddenly they have to apply to so many colleges. So how do you have any suggestion in terms of managing the stress?
I think that it's something that sort of carries on. You think that I was listening to this podcast the other day, and he was talking about how there is this illusion that, okay, you score well in grade 10 and then you've won the world, and then you score well in 12, and then that thing
it goes on and on. Yeah.
So point being, it's never gonna stop. And even now, right, I log on, I get into LinkedIn, that's the app I open the least, because this monkey mind sort of takes over, and we are actually so tuned. We're optimized for competition now, given all of these we have access to these social media platforms, which are great because, again, word for resources like this really gets out. But I think it's really reeling back in, right? I think what has been helping me, I think this is, I kind of used this back then too, but I think just reeling back in and literally taking a deep breath and being okay, X has applied to 10 colleges and they're already done with the process, and I'm just starting out, but realize that X is living a completely different life, right? And then I know this contradicts what I said earlier, but the advice that I'd give to myself is be more ambitious. But I think that in instances like this, it's also very important to have self-awareness, where you're just okay, I wanted to apply to 10 colleges. I may not be able to apply to 10. I may be able to apply to maybe 2. But these 2 applications, I'm really gonna, get them out and do well in them. So I think that's the idea.
Yeah, that's a good advice. Okay, so moving on to next question. What strategy did you apply while writing your essays? How did you ensure that your essays reflect your personality and goals?
Right. So I primarily, this is a good one. So my essays, so I think it's really important to be, again, authentic in your essays, and that's hard, right? Because, and adcoms, they're trying to get through, I don't know, like 20 applications in a day or in like 30 minutes. I don't know how much time they spend on your application. But the point is that it's very important for you to come out of that cookie cutter like mold that they've seen across the board, right? And for me, what really helped is I mean, again, like I'm sure that Mr. Sanjay has a equivalent of this resource, but really doing a SWOT analysis of myself, right? Really understanding my offense stack and my defense stack, and realizing that, okay, what are my key strengths? And, you know, within that, like I literally built a matrix and like I plotted my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, etc. I mean, equivalence per person, but I also supplemented them with 2-3 stories, right? Like, how would I prove this to an next person who doesn't know me? And I think then working my way backwards from there, right? Where I'm just like, okay, like this is what I'm trying to, this is like the SWOT that I'm trying to get through. And these are the stories that will help me get through this. And yeah, then really working your way with the essays. I think like starting with the prompts, especially for me early on, it can get overwhelming. You know, you have that blank piece of paper, syndrome which kicks in where you just feel like it's impossible to get this done. So I think really starting from what you know and then fitting it to what do they need.
Yeah. So you built your like outline and framework first about
Right.
yourself and the story, and then you know, like accordingly you wrote the essays like based on where you belong, what is your personality, your strength and weaknesses, and then based on that you connected them with your prompts.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Very good. So in the common app there is a section of filling in activities. What type of activities do you suggest students should prioritize while filling the application?
Right. So I think this goes back to, again, the part that I was talking about before, with like really leaning into your authentic side, right? I know that there is a lot of conversation around, oh my God, like I should do this activity because it'll look good. But again, like you'll be able to really weave in your story really well if you're doing an activity you like. For me, it was a lot of volunteer work with these young girls in Missouri, right? So it was literally a part of the community. That's where my school was. And just sort of filling that in. And at the time that I was doing this volunteering, I did not know that I was going to add it. So I think that it, for me, as from my vantage point, I think that it can really, like, any and everything can go in, right? You may have an aunt who has her own cloud kitchen and is into baking, and you help your aunt with accounting for that cloud kitchen, right? Or just and you're just trying to help a family member. But I could see this translating as a really powerful activity versus something which is more cookie cutter, which is like, okay, I got into X club because this will make me look like this, right? I think these things are easy to call out. And I think just doing things because you really like doing them. I think that way you can sort of stay authentic to yourself, but you really like stand out because you're doing, you're thinking of things differently. I think more than doing, what this would tell me as a third person is how you're approaching even this question is different. Yeah.
So I think, you are right that just following a trend and writing the way others are writing is not the right approach. But rather than that, be true to yourself, and whatever passion or whatever you are following, whatever you are doing, how do you articulate that as your activities, actual activities, rather than fabricating or like faking it.
Right. Yeah.
Got it. Great. Okay, so the next question is, what kind of profile building, I think we spoke about it, that what kind of profile building, and if you can tell us about your aspect of profile building. Did you try something, or it happened all very naturally to you?
Yeah, I think I would attribute a lot of it to, honestly, again, my school. I was lucky enough to live somewhere 24/7, like 8 months of the year, and they were just throwing me into doing random stuff, which I thought was random at the time, but now I have the foresight to see how it was helpful. I think that what I would really say is there are just so many resources out there, much like Blue Ocean, right? Like, I think it requires extremely minimal effort to find something that you may remotely like, right? And again, like, they can really follow all different themes, like something really random, but like your dadi may go to the Gurdwara every week and like really volunteer. There are different ways to even get involved in like these spiritual places, and like really helping them, I don't know, with their social media or with their marketing. Like, I think their perspective with profile building again needs to really change. Where, okay, like, what am I good at? What is my skill set? What aligns with me? And then where can I add value, right? So I think that's what I would recommend. Even with this initiative that I worked in the boarding school, it was sort of like a random thing, and I did not think I could do anything. And then Mrs. Mark reached out, and she was just like, "Oh my gosh, Khyati, like, you know how to do this software stuff, so like, could you help me?" And it started off like that, right? So I think that just be open to serendipity. Like, you may never know what may help you where. It's just being open, I think. Yeah.
I think it's you rightly said it, that it's a right mix of your interest and what you are good at. You know, if you do activities around keeping these two things in mind, your interest and your strength, that will lead you to right kind of activities, rather than like following someone's advice that you do this for so many hours, you do this for that many hours, like, so that is something I think we should not propagate, or we should not advise to the students. Okay, so next is did you give SAT by any chance?
I gave the ACT. Yeah.
ACT. Okay. So do you have any suggestion for students, and why ACT and not SAT? Can you also, that will be a really interesting comparison. Why did you, because we don't get to meet many folks who have given SAT, ACT. They mostly prepare or appear for SAT. So the difference between why did you decide and how did you prepare for ACT?
Right. So I think I was always a very reclusive student, especially like put this in the backdrop of having to live with your classmates all the time. And I think everyone was, again, this is what I was alluding to earlier, but there's just so much sort of fear mongering that happens and goes around. I was just like, everyone was just like, especially seniors, they're just like, oh my gosh, SAT prep is such a pain. Like this, like getting through this is just painful and hard. And I think that sort of like built a bias in my mind about SAT. And I, like, when it was time for me, I just recollect, I'm like, okay, like I will do anything, but I'm not doing the SAT. And I honestly did not even start with SAT prep or anything. I just from the start started with ACT. And again, I think it was that bias which helped me like perform well on the ACT versus having, I reckon if more people would have taken the ACT and said that, oh, the ACT is hard, I think it would have impacted my how much longer it would have taken me to do well. But I think the one thing I would say is there are a lot of resources out there right now, like a lot of resources for everything. And I think you need to be really intentional about like what is actually helpful, right? Like don't sign up for every SAT seminar that is out there. It will not help you. I can like guarantee you that. Like beyond a point, resources and information overload is just negative and like doesn't help you. So I think the one thing that I would say is get the bare bones of what you need for the prep, and then sort of just put it aside, and yeah, you will you should be able to make your way through it. Sandra, I think you're on mute.
Yeah. How many? You said you applied to 5 colleges only.
Yes, I applied to 5 colleges.
Oh, you were very lucky, and you said that you got into all of them.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
So what strategy did you follow while shortlisting your colleges? What would you suggest students about the number of colleges they should apply to? Nowadays, you find, I come across students who wish to apply to 20 colleges, 25 colleges, 15 colleges.
I mean, yeah, no, I was actually recommending to be the other person, be like, okay, apply to 10. I wish I would have applied to 10 colleges, even though I was fulfilled with my college experience. But I think, honestly, it's so important to go through the website. I think this is something that's underrated. I think that a lot of colleges are able to bring their culture out very well in the websites, and what really resonates with you, right? Because again, you may get into Dartmouth or I don't know, like Columbia or whatever, right? But like the culture may not resonate with you, and then it starts becoming a problem, not when you get in and not when you're there, but like 6 months into college, right? So I think finding that fit is really important. And that's the only thing I did, is I literally just read through the college websites. For me, it was a close call between Bard College and Northeastern. And I sort of picked Northeastern because I was stranded on a mountain for like most of my life. So I was just like, okay, I need to be in a city, and I need to be out there, like in a city, living, breathing city, which is why I picked Northeastern and the co-ops. But yeah, just go through the website. It's all in front of you. Yeah.
I think that's a very good suggestion, advice that, one should try to understand the college very well, rather than just following the names, or, based on suggestions or anyone who advises you to, just apply there. Rather than that, one should definitely understand the dynamics of college, and whether you are liking it, based on your attributes, what you are looking for. Are you looking for just brand, or are you looking for, like actual environment that you are going to love, enjoy, and flourish? So I think that's a very wise advice from your side. Thank you. Okay, so as an international applicant, do you think you had to put more effort into making your application stand out? How did you approach this challenge? Do you think is that a problem? Is that a challenge?
I mean, I think it was a problem for me because I had international students all around me. Like, I think from my batch, there were 30 people who applied to Northeastern. So it's hard because you're sitting on the international side of things. But I think it's easier because, again, like the vast majority of applications they get is going to be very different from yours, right? You're going to make up the 30% of the total that is applying as an international student, which is, again, less than the 70%. So I think, again, really honing into those experiences that you have the opportunity to double click on, like, I don't know, just demographically, right? Like how like even the experience of volunteering in a place like Boston versus volunteering in India is like vastly different, right? Where you actually have study abroad programs to come in and volunteer in India. So really looking around and being like, okay, like what are my strengths? I think it's very easy for us to lean into, oh, I don't have this, I don't have access to that. But like look around you, right? Like there are like 100 things you can really immerse yourself in. And I think you should just look at it like that. Look at your strengths. Yeah.
I think that's very important advice again. And the last question, what I would like to ask and understand, that you spoke about different activities that they should be doing. But nowadays, in different schools, the counselors, the schools, they also suggest students to drive different things in terms of building their profile and leadership roles. So I would just in few bullet points, if you can summarize that for the students, prospective students, that what kind of uh, things they should pursue beyond like interest and like strength. There are things that like a lot of suggestions come to them in order to pursue. So do you have any particular suggestion around leadership roles or extracurricular activities, or you just would again come back and say that one should follow their strength and understand what their interests are, and then accordingly they should follow them?
I mean, I think the only piece of advice I'll give is do not fall into boxes, right? Or the trap of boxes. I remember when I got to Northeastern, computer science was incredibly hard for me. I did not know how to code at all. And I was sitting in lectures with like 80 kids. And I was maybe like one of 5 people who didn't know how to code, right? First lecture. So that can be really intimidating. But again, like I really honed into my experience, and I'm like, towards the end of my time at Northeastern, I worked for gender and leadership, right? Like really figuring out how can we get more women to feel more included in these spaces, right? And like there are a lot of people doing different work there, but it can honestly, I'm just trying to put myself in as a student right now. I'm really passionate about tea, right? Like I love tea. I love learning about tea. And there may be other people, but they just don't even have access to that knowledge yet. So I think like leadership here can really start as small as being like, okay, I'm just gonna figure out how to create like a tea club that meets once a week in school. And we talk about different tea, and we reach out to different companies who are getting tea from all across the country. Where are they importing? Where are they exporting? Like you just created leadership out of nowhere, right? So I think, yeah, just that.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And I think it's kind of informal leadership that you generate out of your interest and out of your strength, and that is something also help you become an innovator. That you think in a very different way and come up with new ideas. So yeah, so I think that's a great suggestion. So Khyati, I think we had this set of questions which generally like students and their parents want to understand, and I really appreciate that you spoke with me very openly and shared your thoughts. Any last piece of advice that you would like to give to students and their parents?
Yeah, I think just concluding with what my team has been throughout, which is just don't be scared. Like you can take a gap year, you can do, if you apply to 10 colleges, you don't get into any of them, there are so many things you can do. The world has changed. It's not like not going to college that at that point in time is the be all end all. So use that and just take all the shots you can, really, and like don't hold yourself back. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Khyati, once again.
Yeah, thanks, Sol. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Thanks.